Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the PSU 365 podcast. My name is Dylan Count Crowley, beat writer, recruiting analyst, a little bit of everything over at Happy Valley Insider of the Rivals Network. I'm joined by my colleague, Marty Leap from Happy Valley Insider, as well as a former podcast regular, our resident superfan, Anthony Hazan. Anthony, it's been a long time since everybody has seen your face. So, how are you doing? Yeah, what's your early thoughts on, I guess not really early, but what are your thoughts so far on Penn State's 6-0 start here?
Good, man. Just doing my normal life routine, just working and just trying to get through day by day as everybody else is. But
Yep.
in terms of this season and what Penn State's been doing, I mean, so far 6-0, right? And no matter what you feel about how it took to get there and the process behind it, they're 6-0, and that's all you can ask for. So excited so far. Hope it continues. Like we're going to talk about, it's an important one this weekend.
Absolutely. And obviously, a lot of news over the last few days. Wednesday's post practice, James Ryan availability was interesting. The big news, obviously, which we're not going to get into on this podcast, but definitely need to mention it, is that former Penn State defensive end Jamil Lyons Jr. and linebacker Kavion Keys, both who have not been with the program since the end of July, have both now been charged with multiple felonies according to criminal dockets recently published online. Both are facing rape charges, sexual aggravated assault charges, and a slew of other um, really, you know, many words you could use, disgusting, criminal charges, I guess you could say. Obviously, let the court system and everything go through it. We're not really going to comment on it. I don't think it's our place to comment on it. And we'll just let all that kind of play out as it should through the legal system and go from there. But definitely worth mentioning that that has come to the public eye over the last 24 hours, um, and is something that we will definitely be watching over the next however many weeks or months. But yeah, just want to get that out there. Again, not going to really talk about it here on this one. I think we all talked about before this. Don't think this is going to serve really as any sort of distraction for Penn State this week. This is, Penn State, these Lions and Keys have not been with the program for 3 months now. Um, and for, I think those who are in the know, whether that's, people in our positions or fans that have the right connections, these charges are not surprising. This has been what has been rumored for quite a while. So I'm assuming, that quite a bit of the team kind of had an idea of what was coming down the road. So I don't think this is really going to serve as any distraction. As Marty said before we went live, if this was something that, occurred in the last couple weeks, and then this was, two players who were off the team as of this week, then maybe it would have served as a distraction. But I think at this point, uh, this is, kind of just new news for most people, but it's kind of old news for Penn State at this point. It was clear that when they were no longer with the team and no longer enrolled at the university, that there was some probably pretty serious legal uh, issues that occurred, and obviously that's what has happened. But that's all we're gonna, I think, say about it at this point. Um, Moving off that, guys, big week, like Anthony said. Penn State travels to Wisconsin, goes to Madison and Camp Randall on Saturday night for a matchup against a red hot Badgers team, a 5-2 Badgers team now, a team that looked kind of down the water after after starting 2-2 with back-to-back losses to Alabama and USC earlier this year, but since has rebounded. Not necessarily the toughest schedule, Perhaps when you look at it over the last couple weeks, they've faced they beat Northwestern, Rutgers, and Purdue. They also have wins over South Dakota and Western Michigan this year. So I mean, Anthony, before Marty comes back here, I mean, through 7 games for Wisconsin, obviously playing their best football at the right time. But I think it's also fair to say, I mean, what's their best win this year against a beat up Rutgers team?
Yeah, it's really tough to judge this Wisconsin team right now.
Yeah,
I think, much like we're going to learn something about Penn State this weekend, I think we're going to learn even more about Wisconsin because, like you said, they're
right.
5-2, which is great, but their two losses were pretty bad losses to USC and Alabama. So, you know, how truly good is this team? Obviously, Braden Locke, who was the backup quarterback to start the year, is now the starter after Tyler Van Dyke got hurt. And he's been solid, and
Yeah,
he's done a pretty good job leading that offense, and he's been more than serviceable in doing so. But like you said, Rutgers is very banged up, especially defensively right now. Purdue probably isn't that good of a team, and Northwestern, while they'll be good one week, they're hot and cold. So
yeah.
they
They're an
won by
enigma.
20, but it wasn't necessarily a spectacular win. The defense played really well, but it wasn't like Wisconsin blew anybody away in that game either. So this is a game that Penn State absolutely needs to be ready for. You're going to get, like I said to you before, you're going to get every team's best shot from here on out. You're the number 3 team in the
Yeah,
country. There's no hiding. You got USC's best shot 2 weekends ago. You're now going to get Wisconsin's best shot in an environment that can be very tough on opponents. When we talk about Big Ten environments on the road at night that really suck to play in, it's Kinnick and it's Camp Randall.
yeah. Now it is worth mentioning Penn State coming into this week um, has defeated each of the last 26 unranked opponents. So that is going right well for them. Additionally, James Franklin has never lost to Wisconsin as Penn State's head coach, and I believe Penn State has now won. Um, I believe the last 5 against Wisconsin. Let me check here. Last 5 against Wisconsin dating back to 2012. So this is a team that Penn State has had uh, their number for the last decade. Marty, I guess I'll quickly go to you. What are your just initial thoughts on this Wisconsin team without going too deep into it? Initial thoughts on this Wisconsin team, as me and Anthony said, kind of, definitely playing their best football, but it's kind of hard to gauge who they exactly are because the level of opponents they have beaten this year haven't exactly been, top of the line opponents like Penn State.
Yeah, I mean they've won 3 in a row, but again, you look at who they've beaten. It's 3 of the worst teams in the Big Ten. So I mean, good. They needed that. Them at 5-2 makes this game look a lot different. But I mean, I'd argue Purdue might be the worst team in the Power Four in general. They beat a very banged up and injured Rutgers team. The Northwestern isn't very good. So I mean, I think this is a Wisconsin team that people coming into this need to probably put a lot of their predetermined notions about Wisconsin aside. This isn't a team that's going to line up and play bully ball and be able to run it at you for a lot of yards. And I think defensively, while they've played much better the last 3 weeks, it's definitely a defense that has some issues, especially with the injuries up front, that Penn State should be able to exploit on Saturday night.
Uh, Absolutely. Wisconsin also since 2020 is 2-11 against ranked opponents, so that also, a trend that's going in favor of Penn State this weekend. That being said, despite I don't know how you guys feel. I think if this game was on a neutral field, um, I think Penn State would be a double-digit favorite over Wisconsin, quite easily. Right now, night game at Camp Randall. Penn State's a 6.5 point favorite, money line minus 240. ESPN's FPI gives Penn State a 70% chance to win this game. I think this line and a lot of the talk coming in this weekend definitely is being strengthened on Wisconsin side by this 3-game winning streak they're on. because you look at it. They lost that game to Alabama 42-10. They lose Tyler Van Dyke in that game. Braden Law comes in. It was pretty ugly, all things considered. And that's an Alabama team that obviously over the last couple weeks since then has shown they're not exactly a elite team themselves. And then USC, they were up 21-10, I believe, in that game, and then was outscored 28 nothing the rest of the way, lost 38-21. USC, again, has proven not to be a legitimate top of the end program this season. Now, of course, Penn State struggled against USC just 2 weeks ago in a 33-30 win in Los Angeles. Um, I look at this game and I think kind of the biggest factor of, if this was a day game, I think this the chance of Penn State winning this game is even higher. But you had, like Anthony said, Camp Randall at night is one of the toughest places to play in the Big Ten. This is a Wisconsin team red hot. This is a Wisconsin team that is looking to kind of reemerge as a top program in the Big Ten under head coach Luke Fickell. Last year was not a good year for them. This season started. It looked like it was going to be another long season after that USC game. They rebounded well the last few weeks. And this is their chance to kind of get a signature win under Luke Fickell in prime time national television against a top 5 team. So, like Anthony also said, every team going forward is going to give Penn State their best shot, and that includes this Wisconsin team. Um, I I think let's start off with this. If Penn State's going to win this game on Saturday, I think they're going to have to obviously dominate the line of scrimmages. Not dominate, but they're going to have to control the line of scrimmage on both sides, but especially on offense. I think you need Nicholas Singleton in this game to be pretty close to fully healthy. He was clearly not fully healthy against USC. Didn't have him against UCLA. The run game struggled. Penn State's running game, I think, has to get back on track in this game for Penn State to maybe not win this. I think they could win this on the arm of Drew Aller. But if they're going to control this game from start to finish and really not give Wisconsin a chance, I think it comes down to having that rushing attack back to where it was earlier this season up until, probably that UCLA game. Let's start you, Marty.
Yeah, I agree. I think they can win the ball, win the game without running the ball as successfully as they'd like to. But I think if they want to come out and put together a comfortable win, a statement kind of win, they've got to run the ball better. And to me, I'm with you. I think that all starts with Nicholas Singleton. There have been a lot of runs in recent week where I feel like holes have been there, and if Singleton was 100%, it's 6-yard gains going for 60 instead. So hopefully that week off did do him a lot of good in that front. And one other thing too, with you mentioning this game being night at Camp Randall, and Camp Randall is not an easy place to play, especially at night. But and I may have missed the game, but I believe from the research I did this afternoon, in his time at Penn State on the road at night, James Franklin is 9-3, and 2 of those losses came before 2016. So kind of, when the roster and the sanctions were still at their worst point for this program. So really since 2016, the only nighttime road game they have lost was against Ohio State in 2021. And that was a game where they were a very iffy offensive pass interference call, and John Lovett away from having a lead late in the game. So this is a situation where, as tricky as it may seem, these are situations where we've seen James Franklin have success in the past, where we've seen him get his teams up ready to go. And, I think another tricky aspect of it is the week before Ohio State, which always kind of throws a wrench into things. But to circle back to your point for running the ball, yeah, I think if they can run the ball the way they were pre-UCLA, I think they can win this game pretty comfortably. They can win this game going away. But if we see the rushing attack we've saw against UCLA and USC, especially if it's because Nick Singleton still is not 100%, I still think they're very capable of winning this game, but it's not going to be as easy as it would be otherwise.
It does make it tougher. And Anthony, I think what we've seen, especially this year or the last few games, is Katron Allen is a really good running back in his own right. But when he doesn't have that speed guy in Singleton to kind of be the change of pace back to, he just doesn't have nearly as much success running the football, in my opinion.
No, without a doubt. Allen is a very good running back. I'm not trying to disparage him at all, but he has a role much like Nick Singleton has a role. And it's really Nick Singleton that has added that explosive element to Penn State's running attack.
Yeah.
And without Singleton and without that threat of the explosive run, it's made it a lot easier for teams to key in on Penn State's rushing attack and really force Drew Aller to beat them, which obviously 2 weeks ago he showed that he is capable of doing. So we'll see how teams adjust to that, or if Wisconsin will make Drew try to beat them again. I think the biggest thing for Penn State this week, maybe not the biggest, but an important thing, is they're going to have to try to find a way to eliminate those slow starts they've had over the entire season. It's clearly become a trend, maybe a worrying trend for a lot of people, that offensively this team doesn't start quickly, and it really takes a second half adjustment for this team to get going. And against most of the teams they've played so far, that doesn't really present a problem. But against better teams, clearly like with USC 2 weeks ago, it can, and it can absolutely cost them some games. It's great that they make second half adjustments. The whole second half team thing that they did in 2016 was phenomenal, but things are different now compared to 2016. This should be a Penn State team that starts quick and is able to sustain it throughout an entire game. So I think that's going to be the biggest key, to see if they can find a way coming off the bye week to start fast and just put the throttle down. To me, that's a difference between a team that could make the playoff versus a team that could actually compete in the playoff.
Yeah, it's really those slow starts this year is the reason that this team really, outside of that Kansas State team, hasn't really, blown anybody out this year. I mean, their wins this year are obviously 6-0, but 34-12, 34-27, 56-0 over Kent State, 21-7 Illinois, 27-11 UCLA, and then 33-30 against USC. I mean, if they didn't have slow starts against West Virginia or Bowling Green or Illinois, those all could have been, well, maybe not Bowling Green, since the defense kind of took a while to get started, but against Illinois and UCLA and West Virginia, those could have been very much bigger differences in those games without slow starts. So I absolutely agree. We almost saw it cost Penn State 2 weeks ago against USC. I don't know if it'll necessarily cost them against Wisconsin if they start slow, but I mean, in 2 weeks against Ohio State, you can't start slow. If you start slow against Ohio State and go down 14-0 to Ohio State in the first half, it's game over. So yeah, I think that's a great point. Coming out of this bye week, Penn State does a lot of self-scouting, tries to fix a lot of things. How do you eliminate those slow starts offensively? Defensively, I think there's been a little bit of slow starts in terms of that first drive, but beyond that, I think they play really good ball for the most part. Second quarters maybe where they actually slow down, as James Franklin pointed out this week. But yeah, it's a good point, Anthony. So obviously Penn State has to get the rushing attack back on pace this week. Just 85 yards against UCLA, 118 yards against USC the last two games. Before that, 222, 234, 309, 239 in their 4 previous games. So that'll be something to watch. Nick Singleton was at practice on Wednesday, which is good. Quinton Martin was not. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a huge, worry if he's not available. They should have Nicholas Singleton. They should have Katron Allen. If Martin can't go, then Smith would go. He has not seen the field yet this season. Quinton Martin has now played in 3 games, so that would give him one more game throughout the rest of the regular season to play before they would potentially burn a redshirt with a 5th game. Moving on, I guess as a whole, do you see any reason for Penn State's defense to be worried about this West Virginia offense on the surface? I mean, Braden Locke has been, solid as a quarterback, but, he hasn't been incredibly efficient. 59% completion percentage, 5 interceptions this year, 7.25 yards per attempt. He's been good, but he hasn't been great. I mean, Tawi Walker has been really good the last few weeks, but again, competition level has not been good. And this pass attack, which has some playmakers, doesn't exactly scare. Wouldn't exactly scare me either when considering Penn State's secondary this season. Um, are either of you concerned about this Wisconsin offense? I mean, if I look at this, I was talking to Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions earlier today, and it's Wisconsin making a score prediction. Can you see Wisconsin get 10 points? Probably. But I'm not sure they can get to, say, 20 points in this game. I think this is a solid offense, but I don't think they've played a defense nearly as good as this Penn State defense this season. And I think putting a redshirt freshman quarterback up against a front seven like Penn State's and then a secondary like Penn State's could be a game that, if things go wrong for Wisconsin, could very quickly snowball.
I'll go first on this one.
Yeah, Anthony.
I think the biggest worry or concern you have if you're Penn State is Wisconsin, especially Braden Locke, as a quarterback that is shown to get the ball out very quickly. He gets the ball out in under 3 seconds. I think we said like 2.5 seconds on average or something like that. So they do get the ball out quick. And that has been shown to be somewhat successful against Penn State's defense, at least in the short term throughout the course of the game. So, and that's been the general trend for him since he became the starting quarterback. So how does Penn State establish a game plan defensively to combat that? Because, traditionally Penn State's a defense that prides themselves on pressure and getting to the quarterback. And that hasn't necessarily been their calling card this year, or at least they haven't been the best at it all the time. So, are they going to be able to get any kind of pressure on Locke to, rattle him and make him throw interceptions, which he has been prone to doing. I believe he's thrown an interception in every game he started this year. So can you get enough pressure on him to throw interceptions? And if you can't, can you mitigate their passing attack and, play good defense, good press defense, make sure the receivers don't get much space?
Yeah, you bring it up. Braden Locke this year, when under pressure, just 9 for 24 for 86 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. PFF has his passing grade as a 27.3 when under pressure, compared to an 81.4 when kept clean, with a 64% completion percentage. Marty, what's your thoughts on this Wisconsin offense this season? And do you think Penn State's defense is up to the challenge of facing a Russian attack this year that has, as Wisconsin has gotten hot, this Russian attack has gotten hot the last few weeks. 228 yards against Purdue, 309 yards against Rutgers, 199 yards against Northwestern, averaging 4.8 yards per carry this season. Has gone over 100 yards in every single game and at least 149 in all but one. You think Penn State's up to the challenge this week?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely capable of it. I mean, again, we kind of touched on it earlier, and I understand that this Wisconsin offense has been better the last 3 weeks, but again, it's been who have you played, and prior to this 3-game stretch, they were one of the least explosive offenses in all college football. They were one of the least efficient offenses. Just there was not much there that was going well. Now, to their credit, they've played much better the last 3 weeks, but you're talking about, again, 2 of the worst teams in the Big Ten and a Rutgers team that it was extremely banged up. So I'm not worried about Penn State's defense in this game. I think they're going to be just fine. I think they can get pressure on Braden Locke, as you guys mentioned. You get pressure on him, he's probably going to make mistakes. He's not going to play well. And again, this kind of goes with the theme here. Yes, they've played better in recent weeks, but still, this Wisconsin offensive line is, it's not what you typically think of with a Wisconsin offensive line. And I think that bodes well for Penn State. I think it could be another big game for Zane Durant on the interior. And I really think that the defensive ends could have a big game against these tackles on Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at this Wisconsin offensive line against one of the better opponents they faced this season, Alabama. They allowed 2 sacks, but also allowed, I mean, their running backs only averaged 3.6 yards per carry in that game. As mentioned, senior running back Tawee Walker has been the guy who's emerged over the last few weeks for Wisconsin a little bit. 198 yards against Rutgers, 126 yards against Northwestern, 94 yards against Purdue. So Penn State would have to zero in on him this season. That being said, I also think this Wisconsin offensive line and this Wisconsin offense, like I said, hasn't faced a defense as a whole that is as good as Penn State's, but they definitely haven't faced a defensive line that is as strong as the Nittany Lions. I mean, Abdul Carter had a slow start to this season, but over the last few weeks, he has emerged as one of the best defensive ends in the country. Zane Durant may be the most underrated defensive tackle in the country this year. Uh, they have 5 defensive tackles that are really comfortable playing in general that are all veterans. Deny Dennis Sutton isn't finishing plays this year, but he's getting pressures on the quarterbacks all the time. I mean, again, this is a game where I think if Wisconsin gets into a situation where they have to throw the ball a ton, which goes back to Anthony's point, if Penn State can get off to a fast start, force Wisconsin to get into a situation where they have to throw the ball a lot in the second half, this is absolutely a game where Penn State's front seven could feast in that second half. That being said, like Anthony also said, I think Wisconsin's going to look and get the ball out quickly for Penn State. We saw how USC used the screen game a lot last 2 weeks ago to success. Wouldn't be shocked to see that from Wisconsin, but also Wisconsin's going to try to run the ball a lot in this one. I think keeping the ball out of Locke's hands. Try to miss. What's the best way to beat a team like Penn State? Shorten the game, get it to the fourth quarter where anything can happen. If you're Wisconsin, you can get this game to the fourth quarter within a touchdown. You're going to feel like you're in a pretty good spot to pull off an upset. But if Penn State could get out early in the lead, this is a game where I think Penn State's front seven could absolutely end up having a huge day against Wisconsin. Anthony, what's your thoughts on that?
No, I 100% agree with you. I don't have too much to add. As long as Penn State wins the turnover battle, doesn't make careless mistakes, and is able to do their thing, they should be able to out talent Wisconsin and win this game. Where they'll come into issues is if they start off sluggish like they have the last 6 weeks of the season, and they create careless turnovers. That's when they'll get in trouble.
Yep. And this is a Wisconsin pass attack that's really not going to take many chances thrown downfield. I mean, Braden Locke, 141 pass attempts this year, or dropbacks, just 15 attempts downfield of 20 plus yards. A majority of their passes come within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage, and that they use the intermediate game about 25% of the time. But this is a team that's going to play, try to make it pretty easy on Braden Locke. So it'll be interesting to see how Tom Allen tries to combat that. Going back to Penn State's offense, it'll be interesting this week to see how Wisconsin's defense tries to stop the pass attack of Penn State, especially Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren obviously had that big game against USC 2 weeks ago. I've heard other podcasts say, national podcasts say this week that if you take away Tyler Warren, this Penn State pass attack doesn't really have anybody who really scares you. I would agree with that, but at the same time, I do think this Penn State pass attack does have guys that can step up and make enough plays to win a game like this. To win a game like Ohio State in 2 weeks, that I'm not sure. But to win a game like this, I think they have enough guys. I guess it's just coming out of the bye week. How do you guys feel about this Penn State wide receiver room? I mean, I think you look at it, and you can include the tight ends. I I think you have a nice group there of, Wallace, Evans, and Clifford as 3 guys that any given day can make a handful of plays that help you win the game. But I don't know if any of them can be consistent enough from week to week to really, become that legitimate number two to Tyler Warren. So just what are your guys' thoughts on this pass attack outside Tyler Warren coming out of the bye week? How do you feel about it heading to the second half of the season? Do you think this is a wide receiver room that can make enough plays for Penn State to go 11-1 or 12-0 throughout the regular season? Anthony, I'll start with you.
I think it's been, I won't say up and down because they've done enough to get 6-0 at this point. But
Right.
Harrison Wallace, I think you want a little bit more from him after what they saw in week 1 out of him, where he was just special and you thought he was about to take over as the guy. I mean,
Right.
Tyler Warren has been phenomenal. I mean, that's been your wide receiver one this year. I mean, let's be honest, Tyler Warren should be winning the Mackey Award and probably should be getting a little more consideration for even the Heisman than he has been, because what he did against USC was just nothing short of superhero. Um,
Right.
and Liam Clifford stepped up and made plays at certain times. Julian Fleming totally redeemed himself for those two catches on fourth down against USC a couple weeks ago. You hope maybe you can build some momentum off of that. So if this team wants to go where they want to go, I still think you need more out of these wide receivers.
Yep.
But it's definitely been better than last year. And last year you went 10-2 with really bad wide receiver play. So it's a step in the right direction, but you still want more, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing before I hand it to Marty here is they haven't really needed to throw the ball a ton this year either. I mean, Drew is on pace for almost 100 less passing attempts this year than he had last year. I mean, he has 146 through 3 games. He's on pace for uh, about two. I'm bad at math on the top of my head. About 292, I think that is. He had 389 last year, so that's 97 less attempts he's on pace for. And I don't see Penn State, having to throw the ball that much more the remainder of the season that would make up for those attempts. So I think that's something that also to kind of consider is here is that Penn State really hasn't had to throw the ball in order to win games this year and really find guys to really, have big games outside of Tyler Warren's game against USC. Marty, what's your thoughts on the passing attack in general heading into the the next 6 games?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Warren is the centerpiece of it, but I mean, I think the wide receivers, I'm with you. You want to see more, especially at the top of Trey Wallace. You'd like to see a little more consistency there. But all in all, the receivers definitely, I think they undoubtedly have been better than last year, and I think they've even probably been higher than what some reasonable expectations would have been. And I think what's most encouraging is, would you like to see Trey Wallace or somebody emerge as that true alpha dog? Absolutely. But the fact you've seen multiple guys step up on multiple different occasions, I think is also encouraging because it gives you that confidence that, push come to shove and a play needs to be made. There's probably 4 guys there in Wallace, Amari Evans, Liam Clifford, and Julian Fleming. You're confident being able to make that play. I mean, like you mentioned, those fourth down catches Julian Fleming made last week, I don't. Those catches aren't made last year. I feel
No.
very confident in that, and I'm not sure even this year with Trey Wallace. I'm not sure those catches are made. I think that's where you see the value of Julian Fleming and his big game experience and just the coaching and the competition and everything he received from the wide receiver room at Ohio State is, yeah, he may have made some mistakes earlier in the game, but when it mattered most, he made the plays, right? It was one of those things where I realize in a lot of ways Fleming is not this player, but you go back to when he was in high school. He was the 5-star talent, 5-star recruit. It was one of those moments where your 5-star kids were making 5-star plays, and that's what you need. And that's where I think the wide receiver room, like I said, while you want to see some more consistency, you want to see some guys improve yet. It's definitely a big improvement over last year. It's probably better than what a lot of people would have expected coming into the year. And yeah, I do. To answer your question, Dylan, I think this group doing what they've done, they can definitely go 11-1. Can they beat Ohio State without improved wide receiver play from start to finish? I don't know. Look at the USC game. I thought in the second half the receivers played maybe as well as they had all year, and they came after playing very poorly in the first
Yeah.
half. I think you need to put together 4 good quarters to win that game, but I think they're very capable of going 11-1 and being a high seeded team in the playoff. Um, with the receivers just continuing to do what they've done.
Yeah, and I looked at it last week in an article. I picked out 6 Nittany lines who can have breakouts in the second half of the season, and 2 of those guys were uh, Liam Clifford and Julian Fleming. And if you look at the last 3 games compared to the first 3 games, um, Julian Fleming and Liam Clifford have really emerged as 2 targets that Drew Aller has really focused on in the last 3 games compared to the first 3 games. Um, for Clifford, uh, where was it here? Of course, I can't find it, but I think he has 11. Yeah, 11 targets the last 3 games after just 3 targets in the first 3 games, And then Fleming, 4 targets in the first 3 games, 11 in the last 3 games. Those two, I think, are going to be big keys for Penn State going forward. Obviously, Drew has built a rapport with both of those guys. And, I mean, I don't think Julian Fleming's ever going to put up the numbers this year that some fans thought he was going to. But if he has a couple more of those big catches that he had against USC, say in 2 weeks against Ohio State, I mean, I don't think Penn State fans are going to care if he finishes the season with, 350 yards if he ended up having, 4 or 5 of the biggest catches of the season, which I think a big reason he makes those catches is because of that veteran aspect that he brings to this Penn State receiver room. And let's not, I think it goes undervalued at times, is I think it was worth bringing Fleming in, even if he doesn't put up the numbers, just for the culture that he brings to that wide receiver room. He was with one of the best wide receivers in the rooms in the country at Ohio State for the last 4 years, 5 years, whatever it was. He was in one of the most competitive position group rooms in the country, and that absolutely is something he brought with him to Penn State, I fully believe. And I mean, I think, like you said, Marty, those catches were not made last year. And I'm not sure if there's a receiver in that room right now who makes those catches that's not Julian Fleming. And I think a lot of that has to do just with that veteran, uh, you know, experience for him and that culture that he has, been a part of for his collegiate career prior to coming to Penn State. And yeah, we'll see if he can. His lasting legacy at Penn State may be the culture that he helps instill in that wide receiver room compared to what he does on the field is my ultimate point there. So those two will be definitely interesting.
One more quick thing, Dylan, on
Yeah,
the Fleming topics while we're on, because I said this on
yeah,
our board last week. And I mentioned, like you said, I think a lot of people had unreasonable expectations number wise from coming into the year. And I said on the board, and I still stand by, and I'm not saying he won't do anything else productive the rest of the year. But I said if just those two catches against USC alone, combined with what he's done in that room with the culture and everything, like you said, those two things alone have justified the addition of Julian Fleming to this roster, in my
yeah,
opinion, because
yeah,
he has completely helped with Marcus Higgins as well, has helped to completely overhaul the culture in that wide receiver room, which so dearly needed to be done. And again, has probably the two biggest catches of the season thus far as well. So
yeah.
if he doesn't catch another pass the rest of the season, Fleming has had a huge positive impact on this season already.
Absolutely. So my entire point of bringing up the wide receivers was, again, it'll be interesting to see how Wisconsin tries to scheme out Tyler Warren this week. And if they do, which Penn State wide receiver kind of becomes the big name this week for Drew Aller in terms of targets. And go ahead, Anthony.
I was gonna say, have you guys caught any of this Kennesaw State game right now? You guys catching the end of this at all?
I'm
I said it on Twitter. If Kennesaw State pulls this off, it won't be talked about because of the teams. This is by far the biggest upset of college football this year,
It might
and I
be.
don't think it'll be talked.
I think
Like
it
again,
just
people aren't going to talk about it because of who they are,
Hey, they're
but
pulling it off.
it'll be the biggest upset of the season. I don't think it'll be talked.
it just ended. It just went final. They ended up winning.
Yeah, like a 0-6 team in their first year in the FBS, upsetting an undefeated team who just compared to the rest of their conference essentially has unlimited resources. This is a monster upset.
Do you think this
Also,
is this bigger than Notre Dame, Northern Illinois? I know this isn't Penn State related,
Yes,
but Cover 3 does
in
this
my
all the time, so
opinion,
we can do it
in
too.
my opinion, yes,
yeah,
because
because
Kennesaw's first year in the FBS, they hadn't won a game. I mean, they've only had a program for however many years. Liberty, with the way Liberty operates with the NIL and the facilities and Jamie Chadwell there's no reason they should have ever lost the Conference USA game as long as Chadwell was there. To be honest with you,
yeah,
Good
and
for them.
eliminates Liberty from the playoff contention.
Good for them.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, 25.5 point underdogs. So, um, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see who steps up for Penn State at wide receiver this week. If Tyler Warren is schemed out by Wisconsin. That being said, I think you can try to scheme out Tyler Warren as much as possible, and Andy Koltaniki will just find a way mid game to scheme him open anyways, or scheme him into being a playmaker for Penn State. Um, we've kind of talked about the keys to the game for Penn State. I think try eliminate the slow start. Could they win this game with a slow start? Yes, but it would make it significantly easier if they don't start off slow. The second key is going to, I think, get pressure on Braden Locke as much as you can. It's a true freshman quarterback who struggles under pressure. Big game for him. Big game for Wisconsin. A lot of pressure on him already. So if you can get pressure from the front seven on him, that'll be huge in this one. And then the other one was really just to get the running backs back on schedule to where they were earlier this season. A lot of that has to do with the health of Nicholas Singleton. So we'll see how those three go. Overall, guys, this Penn State Wisconsin game, I think we all believe Penn State is the much better team on paper, correct? I don't think any of us are really a believer in this Wisconsin team uh, through the last 3 weeks. That being said, night game at Cam Brandel. Wisconsin has momentum. They are going to be fired up for this one. The fan base will be fired up for this one. No road game is easy in the Big Ten, and all the factors makes this one even tougher, right? So where do we sit in terms of a prediction for this game? Do we think Penn State's on upset alert? Do we think Penn State is in danger at all of losing this one? Or is Penn State going to cruise to a seventh straight victory to start this year? Marty?
Marty, you go first.
Yeah, I'm chuckling because they're currently getting everyone off the field in Kennesaw because they put more time.
Too. This is nuts.
Yeah, so Liberty has to. I mean, it's 1 second. But anyway, upset alert. I mean, sure, because I mean, I don't think it's impossible for them to lose. It's not like when they're going to be going to Purdue in a few weeks or something like that. That said, I think Wisconsin's probably going to play about a near perfect game, and Penn State's going to help them out along the way. I mean, obviously, Dylan, you and I will have our official predictions up on the site on Friday, and I think Penn State wins. I don't necessarily know if I'm going to pick Penn State to cover. What is it, 6.5, 7, somewhere around there?
We don't have to give final score predictions today if we.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think I definitely am going to pick Penn State to win. I think this could be one of those games, maybe similar to Illinois, where if you just looked at the score, it tells a much different story than if you actually watch the game. Because I could definitely see a scenario too where Wisconsin gets a backdoor cover in or something like that. So I think Penn State wins. Are they an upset alert? I would say yes, just because I don't think it's impossible they lose. This isn't Purdue. Heck, it's not even when they go to Minnesota a few weeks after that. But yeah, I think they can lose the game. I think it's highly unlikely. I think Wisconsin has to play almost perfect game. Penn State's going to help them out along the way. So yeah, I definitely think the Nittany Lions are going to get to 7-0 and set up one heck of a clash with Ohio State next Saturday at Beaver Stadium.
Yeah, Anthony, where do you sit on this game? I guess you can give if you have a final score prediction, feel free to give your final score prediction, but where do you sit?
I don't have a final score prediction necessarily at this point. I would also predict Penn State to win. I'd have them on mild to moderate upset alert, maybe, just because of the environment, just because it's a Wisconsin team that feels good about themselves and has momentum. And momentum matters in college football, but like Marty said, it would take a damn near perfect game from Wisconsin. It would take Penn State making mistakes along the way to help them. Penn State is the better team, and as long as Penn State plays like the better team, they should win this game despite everything I just said.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game where we can really find out what type of team Penn State is. I feel like in the past, you kind of see Ohio State be put in these games where, oh, Wisconsin has a chance to beat Ohio State this week, upset alert. And then Ohio State goes out and kind of delivers a thumping, and it was never really a game. I don't think that's going to happen this week, but I think this has a chance for Penn State to kind of go out and say, hey, we're a legitimate top 5 team. We're a legitimate contender here for the college football playoff, even potentially, to make a potential run in the college football playoff. And I think coming out with a convincing win would be really a big boost to Penn State's stock on a national level. Because I think for a team that is undefeated 6-0, um, has two pretty decent road wins this year in West Virginia and USC. And when not everybody else is taking care of business, they're still kind of getting left behind in the national conversation. I feel like, in my opinion, I don't know if you guys agree. I don't know if this team is really getting the respect they perhaps deserve. I think there's many who think this team is maybe a pretender at this point. Um, but I think this is an opportunity for Penn State to kind of put that to put themselves in the national conversation as a legitimate top five team with a convincing win. I don't know how convincing of a win they will get. I think they're going to win this game. I'm probably going to pick them to cover. It. I think it comes down to avoiding that slow start. If Penn State avoids this slow start on Saturday, I think this has a chance to be a really convincing win for Penn State. If they start slow, I think they're in for a dogfight. And if you get into a dogfight against this Wisconsin team at night at Cam Randall, anything can happen late in the game. But right now, I think we're gonna pick. I think I'll pick Penn State to win and cover. Probably, I'll probably end up picking Penn State by somewhere between 10 and 14 points, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, if you look at the betting lines for, I think it was for West Virginia, USC, and now Wisconsin, they've all started out higher in favor of Penn State, and by the end, it was much lower. I think Wisconsin didn't start at like 9.5, and now it's down to 6.5. So it's
Yeah,
very clear that people are just banking on Penn State losing at some point. Um, not, I think a lot of people, like you said, believe that Penn State is a pretender. They're overrated. They're eventually going to choke and lose that big game.
and
Um,
historically, that's a
yeah,
fair
you
argument.
can't blame them. That in the past, that's exactly what's happened. So, so far they haven't. Outside of Ohio State, this is the biggest test on the schedule.
Yeah,
If you get through this one and you win this one, outside of Ohio State, there's really shouldn't be much resistance in terms of you going 11-1 at the worst. So,
yeah, and I mean, their last loss, like I said at the top, 26 straight wins over non-conference, or sorry, 26 straight wins over unranked programs. I think that last loss to a ranked program had to be um, that Illinois game back in 2021.
Yeah, it would have been Illinois in 2021.
Yeah. I mean, and that was
The
a game where,
rest of the losses that season came against ranked teams:
yeah, and
Ohio State, Michigan State, and Arkansas.
yeah, and I mean, a game where everything had to go wrong for Penn State. You take 2020 out of the equation because it's whatever. The next unranked loss would have been, I mean, because 2019 Minnesota was ranked at that point, right? Uh,
I would assume 2016 Pitt without looking it up, but off the top of my head, I'm thinking 2016 Pitt would have been the last time.
it may have been 2018 Michigan State. I'll have to look. But yeah, I mean, if not, we're talking about a team that in Penn State that has routinely taken care of non-conference. Sorry, I want to say non-conference, unranked opponents, and I just have a hard time seeing that not being the case this weekend because I think Penn State is the better team on both sides of the ball. They have the better quarterback. They have the better offensive line, in my opinion. They have the better defensive line. I mean, they're better in all facets of this game. The environment is the tough part, but I mean, this is a Penn State team that has gone into tough environments before on the road and has come away with impressive victories. So, yeah, I don't think Penn State's on upset alert as much as others do, but definitely going to be a tough environment. And one, if Penn State makes mistakes or comes out slow, they're going to be in for a dogfight for sure.
Yeah, and one thing I want to add there too, it's something that people don't give it the credit it deserves, and to an extent I understand why they don't, but it needs to be recognized. They James Franklin does a really good job of not losing to teams other than Ohio State and Michigan, especially the last few years, right?
Yeah.
And
So by the way,
eventually,
it was 2018 Michigan State. So I mean,
okay,
outside of the
I,
2020 season, the last two non unranked losses have been Illinois in 2021 and 2018 to Michigan State.
so I stand corrected. But anyway, eventually that streak's going to end. They're eventually
Yep.
going to lose again to a team that's not Michigan, not Ohio State, or not, a bowl game where half your team's not playing. But until that happens, I have a hard time picking against them. And again, I feel like that is, I think a lot of people overlook how challenging it is to do that, to be on this run they've been on the last going
Yeah.
on 3 years now. The staff doesn't get the credit they deserve. I mean, you can look around the country. Teams lose, right? Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt a few weeks ago. You don't mention Notre Dame and Northern Illinois. Excuse me, even the best teams in the country slip up in games they're not supposed to slip up in, and that's something Penn State,
Yeah.
dating back to that 2021 season where there were a lot of factors there with injuries and whatnot. Since then, they haven't slipped up in the games they're not supposed to slip up in, and I just think the coaching staff doesn't get the credit and the recognition they deserve for that.
Anthony, any final thoughts on this game before we actually shift to some recruiting thoughts?
Just gonna say, as a superstitious guy, I knocked on wood for you, Marty. So no worries there. But tempting fate a little bit. But no other thoughts. I think we beat this one to death with our coverage on it.
All right, let's shift to recruiting side of things quickly here. So I think the big name that everybody's been watching the last few days, weeks is four-star cornerback Brandon Finney out of McDonough High School, Maryland, Oregon commitment. Picked the Ducks over Penn State back in June, a little bit of a surprising manner. But Penn State has stayed on his in his recruitment, as stayed in his ear, got him on campus a couple weeks ago, continues to fight there. Things are trending in the right direction for Penn State in the Brandon Finney recruitment, in my opinion. It will be something to watch very closely in the upcoming weeks. But I want to talk quickly, guys. If they land Brandon Finney here this cycle, this defensive back class is an all-time position group class in the James Franklin era. They would have Brandon Finney, Darius Dixon, Jameer Joseph, Josh Johnson, Xavier Thomas, and then Braswell uh, Thomas all in this class in that secondary. I mean, that would be it's already a great position group of defensive backs for Penn State. But if they had Brandon Finney in this mix, I mean, that is a group of guys where you can argue you got 4 or 5 potential guys who could be multi-year starters out of this recruiting cycle if they can land Finney. I mean, already the case, but if you add Finney to that group, which I think Finney could be the crown jewel of the class if they do land him, it would be a remarkable group of defensive backs. Anthony?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Brandon Finney is, potential 5-star type of guy. He's got all the tools. Great athlete. Dixon and Joseph are just really talented prospects. I think Xavier Thomas is the one in that class that's pretty underrated. A little limited because of his size, and he's more of a slot guy than anything else.
Yeah.
The lazy comparison is Daquan Hardy. I think that's a little lazy, but it's not necessarily a bad one. And then Josh Johnson is a nice piece. He has kind of just scratching the surface of his potential. And Braswell Thomas, I think, is going to be really, really good as a safety. So,
yeah, elite athlete.
Yes. So
same thing with Josh Johnson. Elite athletes.
Can't really see Braswell Thomas this year because he got hurt, I think, before his senior year. So, really kind of affecting, his evaluation. But he's a guy that showed out in Penn State camps. I think they absolutely love him as a prospect. So, yeah, this would be an all-time DB class if they could land Brandon Finney. Like you said, it's already really, really good. We'll see where that one goes. Obviously, he visited for the UCLA game.
Yep.
And I know there was a prediction already placed for a flip on another site. So, that's what's got people all excited.
And unfortunately, we do not have the ability to put in flips, but definitely one, if we could put in an unofficial flip, would probably be one that we are pretty close into putting in just because Penn State is trending really well in that direction. There was a lot of external factors that caused him to go to Oregon, I think, back in June, but I think there's those same factors could be, in a way, helping Penn State, in terms of wanting to stay closer to home, as we come down the stretch. I mean, early National Signing Day is just a couple weeks away. Of course, he's not the only flip target for Penn State here. coming down the stretch. Andrew Olish, four-star tight end out of Southern Lehigh, is another prospect that I think Penn State's right in the mix for. Has a great chance to flip down the stretch here from Michigan. Just Marty, what are your what could Penn State potentially get from Andrew Olish if they do end up flipping him? And I mean, uh, just it would be another great addition to this Penn State tight end room, one that they've been on an incredible run with, both in development and recruiting. Already have a really high ceiling guy this class already in Matt Henderson. That would be a pretty good group and or pair between Henderson and Olish. One of
Yeah, excuse me. I think it obviously be a great pair between the two, and not taking any away from Matt Henderson at all. I think he's extremely talented
yeah,
prospect. But Olish is that kind of like elite athleticism at the tight end position, legitimate like top 100 kind of
yeah,
guy. Um, I mean, obviously, if you're Penn State, it should be pretty easy to sell to Olish, right? I mean, we heard when he committed to Michigan, there were some concerns on his end about playing time. And Luke Reynolds has played in every game this year, has played well this year, so that probably quells some of that for him.
and I wouldn't be
And
surprised if we saw some departures from that room in the offseason.
yes, I mean Tyler Warren obviously is going to be gone. You're going to have Reynolds back. You plan on getting Rappleyea back from injury, but there's the way they've used how often they've used 3+ tight ends this year. There's going to be playing time available, and that aside, it's like if you're a tight end, go watch Tyler Warren. Go watch Tyler Warren. And it goes deeper than that. I mean, this program has been on an incredible run at tight end dating back to Jesse James,
Yeah.
really. Since James Franklin got here his first year, from him to Gesicki to Fryermuth, the whole way through, it's just been one after another at the position. And it's continuing now with Tyler Warren, with Luke Reynolds. I still think Andrew Rappleyea, when he gets healthy, is going to be an absolute stud. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot there to sell to Olish. It definitely seems his Michigan commitment at this point is far from firm. As you know, Penn State's not the only program; it's still chipping away there. And I just wanted to mention with Brandon Finney, I would say if that is a flip that comes to fruition, you're going to be hard pressed to find a better cornerback trio in the country in this cycle
Yeah.
than him, Darius Dixon, and Jameer Joseph
Uh,
together. And I'm also with Anthony on Xavier Thomas. I think Thomas might be the most underrated kid in this class. And I think if Finney does flip, to me, he becomes you mentioned the crown jewel. I think he's the crown jewel of the entire recruiting class. I
yeah.
think he is the best player in this class. And, those of us who believed in this all the way back in June and have had a Brandon Finney to Penn State future cast in since June might wind up looking pretty good here in a couple weeks,
Yeah.
Dylan.
Patience. It's a long play. Yeah, I mean, it just I was gonna say with this DB class, if they do, even if they don't add Finney, but if they add Finney, I mean, you wonder how you stop Ohio State's talented wide receiver room. It's by recruiting one of the best DB classes that in program history. I mean, like I said, I think you look at this DB class as it stands so far, and if they could add a guy like Finney, I mean, I think you can make an argument that every DB in this class has the potential to be a starter for Penn State in the future. And I mean, if somebody will say, well, isn't that the goal for every kid you recruit? Sure, but I mean, uh, there are kids you recruit, and we know that they are probably not going to ever be a starting level player and are going to be more of a role player for the team, for the program. You look at this DB class, I think you can see all of them at one point or another potentially being a starter or even multi-year starter for Penn State, especially right now that duo of Darius Dixon and Jameer Joseph. You add Brandon Finney to that mix. I mean, good luck throwing the ball in Penn State in the future. That being said, those are not the only flip guys. Real quickly, other guys are still targeting out there, as we've talked in recent weeks. Bradley Gompers, linebacker of Pittsburgh Central Catholic, continue to chip away on him. He's still committed to Duke. I think that one's going to be a little bit of a harder flip than maybe some originally thought, but I still think Penn State has a good chance of getting it done. Flex Cyrus in South Carolina, Penn State continues to chip away there as well. And then, of course, Zahir Mathis and Ohio State. Mathis takes his official visit to Columbus this week, and I think that official visit, guys, is really going to be either the end point of this recruitment, or if Penn State still has a chance coming out of that recruitment or that visit, I think they would have a really good chance of flipping him. But I think it all depends on what happens this upcoming weekend for Mathis. Anthony?
Yeah, winning breeds these types of results. Penn State, your main objective is just keep winning football games, and you'll keep having chances in these types of recruitments and these types of flip battles. Flips are not easy. Flips are done for the most part in the cloak of darkness and silence. That's how the staff prefers it. That's how most teams in the country prefer it, because it's a lot easier to keep a guy committed than it is to flip a guy in most cases, unless you're just committed to a lower level school and the school going after you is just that much better that it doesn't matter. But yeah, Penn State's winning. They're the number 3 team in the country. That's going to pique a lot of kids' interest and maybe have some of them circle back around. So doubling back quickly on Andrew Olish, you watch Tyler Warren did what he did against USC 2 weeks ago. It's the home state school. I mean, it makes sense that he'd be interested in coming back for a game. I know Michigan, they won't be this bad offensively forever, but what Michigan's doing offensively right now, and you watch the difference with Nittany and what Penn State's doing, I don't know how you're not interested and how you don't make that happen. But, we'll see.
Yep.
I think, too, Anthony, you mentioning Michigan made me think of this, and their offense isn't going to be that bad forever. If you're Andrew Olish at this point, who's going to be your head coach in Michigan? Like, I mean, Sharon Moore's not going to get fired after 1 year, I don't think, but I think he's going to be on an extremely hot seat going into next year, and I think that could be a factor as well.
Same thing could be said for Lex Sars at South Carolina. I mean, depending on how things go for South Carolina the rest of the way, Shane Beamer may not last this year in Columbia. So I mean, that's another thing.
I can tell you from experience down here, the South Carolina has kind of already exceeded expectations for this season. If they go bowling, Beamer's fine.
We'll see if they go. How many wins are they at?
They're at 4 right now. I don't know if they have any gimme games left, but
yeah, I don't think he gets fired. But I mean, if things spiral out of control, I think anything's theoretically possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've got A&M coming up. I know that.
I say, looking at their schedule, obviously they'll beat Wofford. They probably got to get one at Vanderbilt or Missouri, because you probably chalk A&M and Clemson up as losses. So it probably comes down to that Vanderbilt, Missouri back-to-back weeks for South Carolina on whether or not they're going to go to a bowl.
Yeah, and the Oklahoma win helps just on brand name alone. But I mean, Oklahoma is obviously bad, and then their other wins are Akron, Kentucky, and Old Dominion. So, I mean, it hasn't been a murderer's robe of wins, but nonetheless, good point by you, Anthony, who is our resident, not just super fan, but resident South Carolina insider, since he lives in Columbia. Sorry.
Yeah. I will actually be at the A&M game, since it does not coincide with the Penn State game, the night game. So I'm excited to be, I'll be boots on the ground for that one.
So now everybody can go stalk Anthony in Columbia. Now that I've given away his location. But flipping gears to our last little recruiting subject here, the 2026 class, Penn State is going to get on campus one of the top players in state, not once but twice next month. Tyler Merrill tells Happy Valley Insider that he plans on being at both the Ohio State game and Washington game. I believe Tom Lemon, legendary recruiting analyst, has a photo shoot in Happy Valley the day of the Ohio State game, which means many of the top in-state prospects and potentially regional prospects should be in Happy Valley that day. So stay tuned at Happy Valley Insider to see what other top prospects are on campus that day. But Tyler Merrill is going to be on campus. This is a recruitment that's interesting. Notre Dame has been rumored to be the leader at times. Michigan has been rumored to be the leader at times. But, I mean, he's been a frequent visitor at Penn State. I think you have to consider Penn State a legitimate contender here. So, I mean, any momentum they can get with him would be huge. They're building momentum with Joey O'Brien. They're in a great position with Matt Sig. I mean, Penn State has a really good chance here to really dominate Pennsylvania in that 2026 class. Because I mean, you look at it beyond him, beyond those guys. Cam Brickle, they are in on. Colson Gadden will be back for the Ohio State game. They're in on him. Brendan Alexander, Keyshawn Robinson, uh, Deron Barksdale, Elias Cope, they're in on heavily. YD Collier, they're in on. I mean, Tavion Branch. This is a class where you can see them taking almost double digit Pennsylvania prospects in 2026. And it's a pretty good Pennsylvania cycle to do so if they're able to land that many guys. Just, I guess, either one of you have thoughts on Penn State's 2026 recruitment efforts in state and how big it is for them to get a guy like Merrill on campus here, coming up in 2 weeks,
Yeah, I'll say the
twice in the
biggest
next
thing
three.
for James Franklin and what he's still emphasizes in recruiting, which it has not changed since he's got here, is securing the home front. He prioritizes Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania recruits more than anybody, and that still resonates with the fans, and that resonates with the top schools in Pennsylvania. So yeah, I think they've had this class circled as a strong one in state and one that they were going to spend a lot of time recruiting in state, and they've laid the groundwork so far and have put themselves in good positions for a lot of those kids. We'll see where it goes and how it develops, but so far so good. We just got to keep getting these kids back on campus.
And Marty, you will have the final thoughts before we wrap up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what Anthony said. That 2026 class, it's shaping up extremely well for Penn State, how good it is, the best Pennsylvania class in quite a while. And, when you are a program like Penn State, it's not impossible for you to sign a top, 5 to 6 truly elite kind of class. We've seen James do that a couple of times now. And when it's happened because you have years like this where Penn, you look at the 2022 class, you look at the 2018 class, these years where Pennsylvania was really, really good and they cleaned house in Pennsylvania. So I think if they can, they're off to a great start, obviously, like you guys said, if they can continue to recruit Pennsylvania's 2026 class at this high of a level, then that 2026 recruiting class is going to be right there with 18 and with 22 as, on paper at least, one of the 3 best that James Franklin has signed here at Penn State. And obviously a long way to go. A lot of work to be done, but you'd much rather be off to the start they are, with Kevin Brown and with Messiah Mickens and with these guys than not.
Absolutely. Well, with that, let's wrap this episode up. An hour and 7 minutes of non-stop Penn State talk here. Um, yeah, so talked a lot about Penn State, Wisconsin. Talked a little bit Penn State recruiting. Hope everybody enjoyed today's show. We'll be back at it next week. Sometime after Saturday's game to recap Penn State versus Wisconsin and look ahead to, of course, Penn State Ohio State on November 2nd at noon kickoff. Until next time, be sure to go over to PennState.Rivals.com. Check out Happy Valley Insider. You can get 30 free days if you're not a subscriber by using Rivals 30. Check out all the insider coverage there, including Penn State recruiting, where we have plenty of content on that. And then be sure to find us at Twitter at Penn State Rivals. And yeah, until then, everybody have a good one. Enjoy another week of college football, and we'll talk to you all real soon.